They don't value you because you're always there. You've trained them to believe your presence is a guarantee. Every text answered, every call returned, every favor done without hesitation, you became predictable. You gave them your time, your energy, your attention, and your care. And what did they return to you? Silence, indifference, disrespect, disappearance. You thought being endlessly available made you lovable, but it didn't. It made you forgettable, because in this world, what's everywhere becomes invisible, and what's rare becomes sacred. Machiavelli once said, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration." He meant that people are drawn to what seems powerful, mysterious, valuable, not what's simply there all the time. When you're always available emotionally, physically, mentally, you make yourself appear ordinary, and ordinary never creates obsession. You've been taught by parents, by movies, by broken people, that loyalty means proximity, that love means constant access. But that's not how human psychology works. People don't chase what they already have. They chase what they fear losing. And right now, they don't fear losing you. Because you've shown them they'll never have to. You've made yourself predictable. And predictability kills desire. They're not drifting away because someone better came along. They're drifting because you stopped being rare. You became easy to reach, easy to read, easy to predict. And no one becomes obsessed with what feels easy. Not because it lacks worth, but because its worth is too easy to access. Scarcity isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing games. It's about reclaiming your gravity, your sense of self-worth that pulls others toward you without effort. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Stop waiting for them to notice your value. Stop over-explaining, over-giving, over-proving. Stop delaying your disappearance. Start making your presence expensive. Think about diamonds. They're just rocks, the same carbon that makes up pencil lead, but people kill for them. Why? Because they're rare. Because you can't just pick them up on the street. Now imagine someone handed you a bucket of diamonds every day for free. Would you still treasure them? Would you count each one? Would you protect them with your life? Probably not. You'd grow numb to them. That's what's happened with you. You're the diamond, but you've been acting like gravel. You were there when they had nothing. You supported them when no one else did. You forgave them after every mistake. You held their hand through every storm. And now, they ghost you. They delay their replies. They give energy to others. They test your limits because they know you'll stay. You've proven it, over and over. That's not love. That's emotional imprisonment. And the walls of that prison? You built them with your own consistency. So what happens when you finally pull back? At first they'll feel relief. They'll think you're sulking. They'll assume you'll crawl back once the silence becomes too heavy. They'll test the waters, send a breadcrumb text, post a story that's clearly about you, like one of your photos, just to see if you'll react. But when you don't bite, when you stay quiet, detached, unreachable, that's when panic sets in. That's when they realize something's changed. For the first time, they've lost control. Because now you've introduced uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds obsession. Suddenly they start to wonder, where did you go? Who are you talking to? Are you done with me? Did you find someone else? They start rewinding every past conversation. They overanalyze your silence. They check your page, your status, your posts, your patterns. They start to spiral. Because people don't chase what they understand. They chase what confuses them. They don't obsess over what's predictable. They obsess over what's slipping away. This is where most people fail. They try to act scarce, but they still leak energy. They don't text, but they keep watching stories. They don't call, but they accidentally like a post. They go quiet, but post quotes that scream, "I'm hurt." That's not scarcity. That's theater. True scarcity isn't performance. It's absence. It's silence. It's withdrawal, not to punish, but to reset. Understand this. Scarcity is not about pretending you don't care. It's about genuinely detaching, about protecting your emotional bandwidth from those who take it for granted. Let me break it down simply. High value plus limited access equals obsession. If you're always initiating, always explaining, always checking in, you've made yourself emotionally infinite. And anything infinite loses mystery. It loses its edge. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Leo. Everyone called him loyal. Dependable. The good guy. He was always there, never missed a birthday, always replied fast, stayed through disrespect, always understanding, always forgiving, but none of the people he gave everything to ever stayed. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because he was too available. He never introduced scarcity. He never created tension. He never allowed others to miss him. And so, they treated him like background furniture, useful, familiar, but invisible. Then one day, Leo changed. Not out of rage, not from revenge, but from clarity. He didn't make a dramatic announcement. He didn't ghost anyone. He simply stopped showing up. And that's when it happened. They all came back. Not because they missed him, but because they missed the version of themselves they got to control when he was around. Machiavelli once said, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, love and fear." Leo had been loved weakly, carelessly, but when he disappeared, people began to fear losing him. That's when the obsession began. You see, people don't truly value what's good. They value what's rare. You could be brilliant, kind, emotionally intelligent, but if you're too easy to reach, they'll treat you like a free sample on a crowded shelf. Because abundance kills tension, and tension is the engine of attraction. Think about the last time you couldn't reach someone you wanted. Remember that mental itch, that lingering thought, that restlessness. That's the power of scarcity. That's what makes people feel. Now flip it. You've been the one always reachable, always available. And what has it gotten you? Burnout, disrespect, emotional inflation. Your time became cheap currency handed out too freely, spent on people who didn't earn it. And now it's time to change the exchange rate. Here's what Machiavelli would have told you. Appear rarely, and you will be desired intensely. Appear constantly, and you will be ignored effortlessly. That's the law of human nature. People crave what they can't easily reach. They fantasize about what feels just out of their grasp. The moment you're always available, you stop being a mystery. And what isn't mysterious loses its power. Most people think scarcity means drama, posting cryptic quotes, pretending to be busy, or acting detached while secretly checking their phone every minute. But that's not real scarcity. That's insecurity dressed as strategy. True scarcity isn't noisy. It's not a performance. It's silence. It's restraint. It's the quiet energy of someone who doesn't need to prove they've moved on, because they actually have. Scarcity isn't about punishing anyone. It's about recalibrating yourself. You're not disappearing to make them suffer. You're disappearing to remember who you are when you're not orbiting someone else's world. And once you do that, once your absence becomes real, confusion begins to spread. At first, they deny it. Oh, they're just busy. Then they get curious. Why aren't they replying? Then they start to panic. They look for signs, a post, a like, a story, anything. They ask mutual friends about you. They drop casual messages like, "Hey, stranger," trying to see if you'll respond like the old version of you. But you don't. You've changed, and that change terrifies them, because you've stopped being predictable. You've stopped being the comfort zone they could always return to when their ego needed validation. And now, they can't read you. They can't predict your next move. That confusion creates emotional tension, and tension creates obsession. Machiavelli said it best: "It is much safer to be feared than loved when one of the two must be lacking." This isn't about making people afraid of you in the cruel sense. It's about the kind of fear that comes with respect. The fear of losing access. The fear of realizing you've outgrown them. The fear of knowing you've stopped needing what they once used to control you. See, people only value what they can't control. And now that you've pulled away, they feel powerless. But here's the twist: when they come back, they don't return with full commitment. They come back lightly. They test the waters. They throw safe messages, casual remarks, half efforts. "How have you been? Missed our talks. I was just thinking about you." They're not here because they miss your soul. They're here to see if they still own your emotions. They want to know if you'll react, if they still matter enough to make you flinch. And this is the moment most people fail. One quick reply, one like, one little, "I've missed you too," and you've shattered the illusion of scarcity. Because now they know they can still access you whenever they want. Scarcity has to be real, not staged, not performed for attention. Real scarcity means you've closed the door, emotionally, mentally, energetically, not to hurt anyone, but to reset the balance. You're not abandoning people. You're abandoning old habits, overgiving, over-explaining, overstaying. You're not closing your heart. You're closing the gates to those who knock out of boredom, not respect. And yes, you'll lose people. You'll lose the ones who only stayed because you were easy to reach. You'll lose the ones who liked you when you were weak, dependent, endlessly forgiving. But what you gain is clarity. You gain peace. You gain your edge back. And eventually, you gain respect. Because respect only exists where control doesn't. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to insult them. You don't need to post quotes about self-worth or cutting people off. You just need to stop being available on demand. Machiavelli would call this governing with fear and absence. Not fear of you, but fear of your detachment. When people realize they can't access you whenever they please, they respond in one of two ways. They either rise to your standard or disappear entirely. Both are victories, because now your peace is no longer up for negotiation. You've stopped selling your energy at a discount. You've made your presence expensive again. And now the roles have reversed. They're the ones refreshing your page. They're the ones waiting for your next move. They're the ones replaying conversations in their heads, trying to decode your silence. Because now, you're scarce. And scarcity breeds obsession. You're no longer begging for attention. You're not waiting for replies. You're not chasing closure. You've reclaimed the leverage you gave away. You've done what Machiavelli described as the ruler's greatest art, to appear present when needed, but to retreat before they believe they own you. This isn't about romance anymore. It's about power. The kind of power that comes from emotional discipline. The kind of power that turns mystery into magnetism. When people believe they no longer have constant access to you, they start to work for it. They compete for it. They crave it. That's the moment everything shifts. No more begging, no more chasing, no more emotional bleeding for those who treat your heart like entertainment. You've mastered the first rule of psychological scarcity. The less they can reach you, the more they'll reach for you. Because obsession doesn't begin in comfort, it begins in loss. People don't obsess over what makes them feel safe. They obsess over what makes them feel uncertain, challenged, confused. They obsess over what they can't figure out. And when your silence replaces their control, you become that mystery. That's why detachment works, not because it's cruel, but because it forces others to confront their dependence on your attention. When you finally stop responding, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood, you remove their power. They'll try to trigger you with guilt. You've changed. You're cold. I thought you cared. They'll test your boundaries, hoping to drag you back into the emotional loop. But don't take the bait. Your silence is your statement. Because the truth is, they were never addicted to you. They were addicted to the control they had over you. And now that it's gone, they're left facing the emptiness they used to fill with your availability. So stay quiet, stay scarce, stay focused. You're not punishing them. You're protecting your value. You're not ghosting them. You're guarding your peace. You're not ignoring them. You're remembering your worth. That's the art of scarcity. The Machiavellian art of emotional power. You don't raise your voice. You raise your value. You don't announce your exit. You simply leave and let the silence echo louder than any words ever could. Let's talk about the turning point. The moment your silence begins to echo louder than their noise. At first, they think you're bluffing. They tell themselves, "You'll come back." They test you with a casual text, a reaction to your story, a small digital breadcrumb. They think you're still orbiting them, just waiting for a reason to respond. But then they start to realize something feels different. The old version of you, the one who reacted instantly, who explained, who chased, who cared too much, is gone. And the new version, silent, calm, detached. And that silence, it terrifies them. Because silence leaves space, and space creates imagination. They start imagining where you are, who you're with, what you're thinking. They scroll back through every message, analyzing your tone. They wonder if they pushed too far. They replay the last conversation, the last look, the last word you said. They begin to spiral. Because when someone loses access to what once made them feel powerful, they don't just feel loss. They feel confusion, and that confusion becomes obsession. They'll tell themselves they don't care. They'll post online like everything's fine. But behind that mask of indifference, they're thinking about you constantly. Because people don't obsess over what they understand. They obsess over what they can't predict. And unpredictability is the fuel of attraction. That's the Machiavellian truth. The less they can read you, the more they want to. The less they can reach you, the more they'll chase. But here's where most people destroy their progress. They start leaking emotion again. They stay silent for a week, then break and check their stories. They avoid texting, but they post quotes about self-worth. They want to appear strong but still crave validation. That's not power. That's performance. True scarcity means you've left emotionally, not just digitally. You've stopped orbiting their existence. You're not performing strength. You've become it. It's not an act. It's alignment. You're no longer trying to convince anyone that you're valuable. You know you are. And that quiet knowing, that effortless self-possession, that's what pulls people in harder than any speech or post ever could. Because now, your absence has weight. It's not just physical, it's energetic. They feel it. They sense the shift. The person who once poured warmth into every interaction has gone cold, not out of hate, but out of mastery. And the more peace you display, the more chaos they feel. They'll start to test the silence. You'll get a message like, "Hey, how have you been?" Simple, innocent. But it's not random. It's a probe. They want to see if they still have emotional influence. That's why Machiavelli said, men are driven by two impulses, love and fear. Love makes them comfortable. Fear makes them act. When you were endlessly loving, you gave them comfort, the illusion that no matter what they did, you'd still be there. But now that you've become scarce, they fear losing what once made them feel important. And fear always drives stronger behavior than comfort. That's when they start chasing again, not because they love you deeply, but because they're unsettled by the loss of control. They'll disguise it as care. I was just checking in. I miss talking to you. Things aren't the same. But behind those words is one question they're too proud to ask. Why aren't you available anymore? Because your silence has rewritten the power dynamic. When you were over-available, they were the chooser, deciding when and how to engage with you. But now, scarcity has flipped the script. Now you are the chooser. They'll send out small emotional hooks to test your weakness, to see if the old version of you still lives inside. But the old version of you died quietly, the moment you realized your worth doesn't need witnesses. Now your calm is your crown. Your silence is your shield. Your absence is your empire. Understand this. People don't chase love. They chase certainty lost. When they knew they could reach you, they didn't care. But now that they can't, their minds can't let go. This is how obsession works. It doesn't start when they have you. It starts when they lose you and don't understand why. That's why you must never break your silence prematurely. Don't ruin the mystery by explaining your absence. The moment you justify your withdrawal, you return control to them. Remember Machiavelli's lesson. Never reveal the full measure of your intentions. You don't need to post quotes about healing. You don't need to announce that you're done. You don't even need to unfollow or block. Just vanish quietly. Let them wonder. Let the silence do the talking. Because when silence replaces drama, it becomes unbearable for those who thrived on chaos. They wanted a fight, but you gave them peace. They wanted an argument, but you gave them indifference. They wanted noise, but you became a void. And a void drives the human mind insane. Because people can handle anger. They can handle confrontation. But they can't handle not being able to read you. That unreadability, that fog, that's your power. You've become the riddle they can't solve. That's what Machiavelli understood about rulers and influence. It's not just about strength. It's about perception. The ruler who can't be predicted holds the greatest power. And now, that's you. You're no longer the one explaining yourself, chasing understanding or fighting for clarity. You are the clarity. You've reclaimed the gravity that pulls everything back toward you naturally. And slowly, people start orbiting again, but this time, they're careful, respectful, measured. They sense the difference. They sense that your time, your energy, your words are now expensive. That's the quiet transformation of scarcity. You don't demand respect. You inspire it through absence. You don't threaten to walk away. You simply do. And the beauty is, the people who are only with you for convenience will fall away. They'll fade into the background, searching for someone else to drain. But the ones who truly valued you, they'll come back different. They'll approach softly, respectfully, because they now understand the cost of access. That's how scarcity purifies your circle. It filters the opportunists from the loyal. Because in every relationship, romantic, social, professional, the same law applies. When something becomes too available, it becomes undervalued. That's not cynicism. That's psychology. That's economics. That's power. You can't expect people to treasure what feels infinite. The human brain assigns value through limits. When something is scarce, it creates urgency. So the moment you limit your access, You increase your worth. You become the diamond again, not the gravel. And they feel it. Every unanswered message, every ignored call, every moment of quiet. It cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Because silence speaks in a language the ego can't decode. That's why, when you finally stop giving them the drama they crave, they start to crumble. They'll wonder, are they done with me? Have they moved on? Have they found someone else? That emotional chaos, that uncertainty becomes the new addiction. Because obsession isn't born in love. It's born in loss, confusion, and fear. And when they can't predict you, they can't control you. That's the essence of Machiavellian power. Control through unpredictability. You don't dominate through force. You dominate through restraint. You don't enslave through words. You enslave through silence. And the longer you stay detached, the stronger your influence grows. Until one day, the very people who ignored your presence will start craving your absence. They'll scroll through your old messages. They'll re-watch your stories. They'll remember the sound of your voice and the calm of your energy. Because now, they finally understand what they lost. Something that can't be begged for or replaced. You. Not the you that begged, not the you that over-explained, but the you that finally remembered your worth. That's the rebirth that Machiavelli would call strategic transformation. You've gone from the pawn to the player, from the one waiting for permission to the one who decides who gets access. You've learned the most ruthless lesson of power. Those who control their emotions control the world. And from now on, you'll move differently, not with noise, but with purpose. Not with anger, but with silence. Not to be chased, but to be respected. Because when your presence becomes rare, your absence becomes unforgettable. Now, let's look at what happens when your silence settles in, not for a few days, not for a week, but for long enough that they finally understand you're not coming back. At first, they panic. They keep trying small moves, subtle messages, shared memories, harmless jokes, anything to get a response. But when nothing works, the panic turns to obsession. They start watching everything you do, every post, every story, every change in your routine. They're not looking for you. They're looking for a sign that you still care. But there's no sign. There's only calm. You're no longer orbiting their emotional gravity. You've become your own center of control. And that shift, that stillness, is the moment your power locks in. Because when you finally stop giving reactions, you take away the only weapon they ever had, your attention. People don't realize how powerful attention is. It's the most valuable currency in every relationship. Wherever you give it, you give power. When you withdraw it, you take that power back. Machiavelli would call this governing through absence. You rule not by force, but by control of presence. When you were always available, they felt safe. Now that you've disappeared, they feel unstable. They can't read you, they can't predict you, and the human mind can't handle uncertainty for long. So it does what it always does, it obsesses. They begin asking questions that have no answers. Why aren't they texting me? Did I do something wrong? Are they over me? Who are they talking to? That's when the self-doubt begins. And self-doubt is what destroys people, not rejection. You've become a mirror for their insecurities. Your absence forces them to confront everything they didn't want to see about themselves. Their control issues, their entitlement, their emotional laziness. You were their comfort zone, their emotional crutch, their guaranteed fix. And now you're gone without explanation, without closure. That's what breaks them. Because closure is a form of control. It gives people the illusion that they still have power in how the story ends. But when you vanish silently, you take even that away. and that silence becomes their punishment and their teacher. They'll go through phases: denial first, then anger, then guilt, then finally realization. But by the time they reach realization, you're already somewhere else mentally, emotionally, maybe even physically. You've evolved beyond needing their validation. That's why your silence has to be real, not tactical. Because if you're pretending, they'll feel it. Real detachment can't be faked. It has a different energy, calm, grounded, untouchable. You've stopped checking their stories. You've stopped drafting messages you'll never send. You've stopped building imaginary conversations in your head. You're not waiting for a reaction. You're not watching for their next move. You've moved on from the game entirely. That's what they can't process. They expected anger, not indifference. They expected drama, not stillness. They expected to see pain, not peace. And that peace your silence without bitterness drives them insane. Because deep down, they were counting on your reaction to validate their worth. They wanted proof that you still cared, even if it came in the form of rage or tears. But you gave them nothing. And now they're left wrestling with the one question that never leaves the mind of the manipulator. Did I lose control, or did I never have it? That's the power of true scarcity. When you pull away without warning, without performance, without malice, your absence creates mythology. You become larger than life in their imagination. You stop being a person they can reach and become a symbol they can't forget. They'll start romanticizing you, rewriting history in their mind. Suddenly you weren't difficult. You were deep. You weren't distant. You were mysterious. Says they'll project meaning onto your silence because it's the only way to explain the void you left. That's how obsession forms. The need to fill a void that was once full of your energy. And the cruel truth: they never truly valued you when you were there because they believed your presence was endless. But now that you're gone, they finally realize you were the rarest thing of all. Someone who gave freely, and then, finally, stopped. They'll come back. They always do. But they won't come back the same. They'll come back lighter, safer, testing the waters. They'll send half efforts. I've been thinking about you. I miss how we used to talk. I hope you're okay. These are not expressions of love. These are emotional diagnostics. They're checking for weakness, and if you react even slightly, they'll know the spell is broken. They'll know the old version of you still exists, waiting to be accessed. That's why silence must be sustained. You can't just go quiet for a week or a month and then slip back in. You must hold your ground until silence becomes your new normal, until your peace feels more rewarding than their attention ever did. Because every small response, every emotional relapse tells them, you still need me. And once they know that, the game resets, and you're back in the cage you just escaped. So don't relapse. Don't peek. Don't engage. Not because you hate them, but because you respect yourself too much to trade your peace for a temporary hit of attention. Machiavelli once said, "Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance." He meant that people don't grieve people. They grieve the power and benefits they lose when people leave. So when they miss you, understand what they're really missing. It's not your laughter, not your kindness, not your soul. It's the feeling of control they had when you were always available. That's why they'll chase you harder when you're silent, not because they suddenly love you, but because they've lost the comfort of ownership. But don't fall for the illusion of change. When they come back, they'll promise growth. They'll use words like, "I've realized," and "I miss the old us." But it's not real reflection, it's fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of losing the emotional power they once had. And fear makes people act sincere until they feel safe again. Then they'll revert to who they've always been. That's why silence isn't revenge, it's revelation. It reveals who will fight for you and who will fight for control. Your absence will filter them faster than your words ever could. Because words can be manipulated. But silence can't. Silence exposes intentions. And once you see their true colors, you'll never unsee them. That's when you finally understand the secret Machiavelli spent his life teaching. Power is not taken, it's withdrawn. You don't dominate others by force. You dominate by controlling yourself. By controlling your words, your reactions, your access. And when people can no longer predict or provoke you, they lose the ability to use you. That's the moment your energy becomes priceless. And once your energy becomes priceless, you become unforgettable. Let's close this with the truth. Machiavelli understood better than anyone. Real power doesn't come from what you say or do. It comes from what you withhold. You've gone silent. You've withdrawn your energy. You've stopped explaining, stopped chasing, stopped defending your worth. And now the silence itself has become your weapon. Because silence is not emptiness. It's authority. It's the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. At first, they think your silence is temporary, a tantrum, a mood, a test. They wait for the old you to return. The version that always replied, always cared, always came back. But this time, you don't. You've outgrown the need to be understood by those who only valued your accessibility. You no longer speak for validation, you act for liberation. And the longer you stay quiet, the louder your absence becomes. They begin to feel it in every empty message thread, every story they post hoping you'll view it, every late-night thought that whispers, "What happened to them?" Your silence starts haunting them. Not because of what you did, but because of what you no longer do. You used to respond instantly. Now they wait. You used to reassure them. Now they guess. You used to chase. Now you move forward. And that reversal, that sudden shift from abundance to scarcity, triggers the oldest instinct in human nature, the fear of loss. Machiavelli once said, "Men sooner forget the death of their father than the loss of their inheritance." When he wrote that, he wasn't just talking about wealth. He was talking about emotional ownership. When people believe they have access to you, they treat it as an inheritance, something permanent, something owed. But when you take that away, when you remove their access, they panic. They realize they were never in control. And that realization, that they never owned what they thought they did, is what drives obsession. Because now your absence feels like theft. Like something precious was stolen from them, even though it was never theirs to begin with. That's what true scarcity does. It flips the emotional economy. You're no longer spending your energy trying to prove your value. They're now spending their peace trying to regain it. That's why silence is more powerful than confrontation. Anger gives them engagement. Silence gives them uncertainty. Anger says, "You still affect me." Silence says, "You no longer exist in my world." And nothing destroys the ego faster than indifference. When you walk away without rage, without bitterness, without spectacle, just quiet certainty, you leave behind something far more painful than rejection. Doubt. They start to wonder, did they ever really care about me? Were they always this strong? Did I ever matter as much as I thought I did? That spiral is what Machiavelli would call psychological rule by absence. You're not controlling them directly. You're controlling their imagination. And imagination is far stronger than presence. Because presence can be explained, but absence must be interpreted. They begin filling the silence with stories. They tell themselves you must be busy, or cold, or changed. They tell others they don't care, but they do. They care in the way people care about unsolved mysteries. You've become the riddle they can't solve, the question that gnaws at their ego. And here's the beauty. You didn't have to manipulate, argue, or threaten. You just stopped showing up. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, "A wise ruler should appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, but be ready to act contrary to those qualities when necessary." You were kind. You were loyal. You were patient. But now, it's necessary to become distant, selective, unreadable, not to hurt them, but to protect yourself. Because you finally understand that not everyone deserves access to your emotions. Your energy is not a public service. Your time is not community property. Your empathy is not infinite. You're not running away, you're reclaiming control. You're teaching the world and yourself that your presence has conditions, that your love, your attention, your compassion are privileges, not guarantees. And once you embody that truth, you become untouchable. They might still reach out. Some will send jokes, pretending it's casual. Others will send guilt, saying you've changed. A few will even try anger, hoping to spark a fight because even conflict would mean connection. But you don't give them what they want. You don't defend. You don't explain. You don't announce your peace. You live it. Because every reaction is a relapse, and every relapse tells them, you still have access to me. You're done giving access. This is the new phase, not revenge, not punishment, but replacement. You replace reaction with reflection. You replace chasing people with building yourself. You replace noise with focus. And as your silence deepens, something remarkable happens. Peace starts to feel more addictive than attention ever did. You wake up without checking your phone. You move through your day without waiting for messages. You feel a sense of freedom you didn't know you were missing because you're finally not performing anymore. You're not trying to be seen. You're just being. That's what scarcity does. It restores balance. You've gone from being emotionally infinite, available to everyone, to being deliberate, selective, rare. And the rarest energy in the modern world is calm detachment. You don't need to tell anyone you've changed. They'll feel it. They'll sense it in the pauses, in the unavailability, in the way you no longer seek to prove anything. That's real power quiet, invisible, undeniable. So here's how it ends. They'll think about you when they can't sleep. They'll replay conversations, trying to decode them. They'll scroll through your photos, wondering how you became so still. They'll realize that losing you wasn't a moment, it was a process, one they helped create. And by the time they understand it, it's already too late. Because you've mastered what Machiavelli called the most necessary art of the ruler, to appear when needed, but to retreat before they believe they own you. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. You've stopped trading your power for attention. You've stopped offering your peace to people who feed on your chaos. You've become rare again, and rare things are not chased out of pity. They're chased out of awe. So remember this. If you want to be remembered, disappear silently. If you want to be valued, become scarce. If you want to be desired, stay unpredictable. And if you want to be powerful, stay gone until you're no longer missed, but respected. Because that's when you've truly won. Not when they come back, but when you no longer care whether they do. That's not detachment. That's liberation. And liberation, Machiavelli would say, is the purest form of power.